Brexit is dominating everything at present, which for the markets means complete uncertainty for the business community and also for the economy. There's also a souring of external relations between the UK and the remaining EU countries. What that means for the future remains to be seen. Anthony Wells joins us now from YouGov. Anthony, good to talk to you. How does the situation look from YouGov's position, and what does the public think of Boris Johnson?
He's become an increasingly divisive figure. And when the Conservatives elected him, it was because he was seen as the Conservative who could reach parts others couldn't, and was a particularly popular and likeable figure. But it's really no longer the case. He's very popular with Leavers, particularly over the last week over the issue of prorogation and similar. People have seen him increasingly as a strong and decisive leader. But on the other side of the divide, he doesn't reach out to Remainers anymore. He's seen as very dishonest and not even particularly likeable anymore. So from once being that celeb who could appeal to all sides, he's now another politician, and a divisive one at that.
So what about the wider view then on where the public support is for Brexit? And of course we must remember that Boris Johnson came to the position he's in on the promise of what he then said was a delivery of a smooth Brexit and an exit on the 31st of October, which now no longer seems to be the case. So what is YouGov now saying about the support for Brexit across the public?
There's been a very slow but steady drift against it. So now when we ask people if it was the right or wrong decision, we typically find about 8 or 9% more people think it's wrong than right, and everyone finds similar. If you ask people how they'd vote in a new Brexit referendum now, you normally find Remain is about 8 or 9 points ahead. Most people, of course, haven't shifted their views. It's just it was so close to begin with, 48-52, that just a small number of people on both sides shifting back and forth means now it's consistently the public is just slightly against. However, if you look under the cover of that, people have again polarised. So a year or so ago, lots of Leavers would have been happy with a deal, or happy with a compromise of a deal. But these days, the majority of Leavers want to go on no deal because that's seen as almost the only true version of Brexit. Anything else is Brexit in name only.
So in terms of an election, of course, we are hearing, I think most recently, Jacob Rees-Mogg has now said that there will be time put aside at the beginning of next week now to look at this potential election, possibly before Brexit Day. In terms of the election itself, assuming it happens soon, where is the public along this line of split between the two main factions, but of course also we've now got to consider other political parties as well?
The Conservatives actually got a healthy lead in the polls. So it varies between pollsters, but it's as high as 10 points. There's even a couple of polls with them up at a 14-point lead. That's not because they're particularly popular. Their support is still substantially down since the general election. It's because Leave voters are only really split between the Conservative Party and the Brexit Party, whose support has been dwindling ever since Boris Johnson became leader. On the other side of the political divide, amongst Remain voters, it's split between Labour and the Liberal Democrats and the Greens and the SNP. So the Conservatives are ahead and starting pole position just because their side of the political divide is far more united.
Are you saying, from what you just said, you're talking there about on the Leavers side, you've got obviously the Brexit Party and the Conservatives. Are you saying the Conservatives by themselves are out in front, or are you including the Brexit Party allocation in that lump, if you like, on the Leave side?
No, by themselves alone, they're still ahead. They tend to be up in the mid-30s because the Brexit Party have been pushed down to only sort of 10, 11, 12%. So they've got by far the biggest chunk of Leave support. If you contrast it over amongst the Remain voters, then you've got Labour and the Liberal Democrats both up there sort of in the low 20s or just below the 20% mark, and then you've got a chunk of support to the Greens and then you've got a chunk of support to the SNP. So it's very much as if we were in a political system with AV or some other voting system, you'd be looking at an incredibly hung, mixed-up parliament. But with first past the post, if you've got one party who is relatively united support against lots of other parties who've got a divided, fragmented support, then the electoral system is likely to heavily favour the Conservatives.
But if you look at Conservatives by themselves in your most recent poll, they still don't command a majority, do they? They might command the largest party, but would they command a majority if they were to gather all their votes together with the Brexit party? Is that what you're saying?
They would, even with that relatively low level of overall support in the 30s, if those votes fall the right way, they can still get the majority of seats. I mean, certainly if they manage to eat up the Brexit party's support even more, either through a formal electoral pact or just because they manage to win over the support of the Brexit party's remaining voters, they could come up with a really quite crushing victory. But on the other hand, that could just as much happen on the other half. If during an election campaign one of those Remain parties did come through, say that Joe Swinson, for example, broke through in the way Nick Clegg did, or say that, like in the 2017 election, people held their noses and thought, well, actually, Labour are the leading Remain party. Labour are the only party who can actually stop Brexit, and we saw Labour gaining at the expense of the Liberal Democrats and the Greens. If that was the case, then you would be looking at a hung parliament. You would be looking at an election that hadn't cleaned up anything. You could even be looking at a Labour victory. I would see a possible election now as really that sort of contest. It would be a case of which side can round up their support. So can the Conservatives get all the Leave support behind just them, rather than having it split? Can Labour or the Liberal Democrats get all the Remain support behind one party? Because it's really not a case of winning over people from the other side of the political divide. The Conservative Party aren't going to be trying to win over Remain voters. The Labour Party, Liberal Democrats and Labour aren't really going to be trying to win over Leave voters. Each side is going to be, can I maximise support out of my own side of the political divide? And the winner would be the party that does best at that.
OK, lots of moving parts. Anthony, thanks indeed for joining us. Anthony Wells, Director of Political Research at YouGov.